Hi guys, previously I've done a video on how to place your Sonos subwoofer, and I've also done a video on how to best place your Sonos Arc for optimal listening pleasure. Today we will touch on the topic of how to place your surround sound channels. So if you're interested in finding out about how to place your main Sonos Arc or your soundbar for that matter, please check out the video which I'm linking up here above. And if you have a sub that you are trying to find optimal placement, do check out the other video that I'm placing up here as well, and it will teach you how to place that sub, or actually the principle of placement for sub applies to across any subs, not just the Sonos sub. So if that's your interest, do check out the video. So for today, we are going to concentrate on how to place the Sonos surround speakers. So in my usual fashion of giving you the answer up front, so you have to stay around and stick throughout the whole video, here it is. I'm borrowing this picture from the Dolby website. If you look at this, this is a Dolby 5.1 setup. So towards the top of the screen, that's where your screen is, and you have your left, center, and right speaker channels. And at the back, this is your main listening position, and you will see that you have two speakers flanking the side a little bit to the rear. Now note, this is a 5.1 setup. The ideal placement for the surround speakers are going to be about 20 degrees towards the rear, right? 20 degrees towards the rear. So if you look at your sides as 90 degrees, push them back a further 20 degrees. That's according to the diagram here, but in terms of height placement, ideally as close to ear level as possible when you're sitting down in your main listening position. And if you go through the Sonos S2 app, you will realize that Sonos actually allows you to set the distance of your surround speakers. How far is it away from your main listening position? It goes below 2 feet, and you have 2 to 10 feet, and you have 10 feet and beyond. My experience says that you should ideally place the speakers about 3.5 to 6 feet away from your ear for either speaker. So there's a total of 7 to 12 feet in between the two speakers. And if you can help it, do not place these speakers in the corners of the room. That will really allow the sound to pull and bloom, and it becomes very boomy and distorted. It's not the ideal crisp listening conditions that you want out of your surround channel. So where possible, do not place your surround channels into the corners of the room. Clear them a little bit, maybe about 1 feet, 2 feet if you can afford them, but not in directly into the corners of the room. So that is the very quick summary that I have. In short, ear level, about 3.5 to 6 feet away from your ears, 20 degrees behind you, pointing towards you. Not to the front, not to the screen, pointing at your ears. And ideally, put some space between the speakers and the corners of the room, as well as the walls. But the reality is not always that simple. You don't always get to choose how you want to place your speakers, where you can place them. There's always your partner having some opinions on where these speakers, these large boxy things, can go. There's also the concern of space and how much space you have in your setup in your room. So while I've shared with you what is the optimal, it does not mean that you have to stick to them. You can still get reasonable performance if you're willing to make a few tweaks here and there, even if they are not in the optimal listening position. So if you have some time, stay around and we'll dive into the topic in detail for the rest of the video. So when it comes to placing surround speakers for your Sonos setup, you are spoiled for choices. So first up here, this is the IKEA Symphonics bookshelf. There's also the lamp, which you can use them for rear surround channel speakers. And there's the Sonos One, which I don't have it here, Sonos One SL, the Sonos Play Ones, and you have the Play 3s, which is here, and the previous Play 5s, and now even the Sonos 5s. And you can use all these speakers as your rear surround channel. Now, the next thing that I need to let you know is that if you're thinking of buying a Sonos Move, you cannot actually use the Sonos Move as rear surround channels. But if you get the Sonos M, and if you're driving in-wall speakers or in-ceiling speakers with the Sonos M, you can actually pair the Sonos M into your setup as the rear surround channel. As to how rear surround channel sounds like when the sound is coming from above, let's talk about that in a little bit. So your choice of any of these speakers or the ceiling speakers, if that's to your liking, it impacts your sound signature. More importantly, it affects the overall volume of your whole system. So you might be surprised to find out that actually, depending on the surround speakers that you are choosing to pair with your soundbar, you actually get quite a different response in terms of volume of the whole setup that you have. The bigger the speaker, the louder it goes. But for the best value of money, this IKEA Symphonics bookshelf is still the one that I'm going to be recommending. $99 times $2, $198, you get rear surround channels to your setup. So if you are running without surround setup, and if budget is a concern, come on, don't think twice. Don't think even about the Sonos One. Go for these guys and you have surround setup. And surround really improves the performance of your setup tremendously. The most important thing that will impact your choice of speaker is actually the amount of space that you have, the kind of placement that you have. Now, if you have space, then, and money is not a concern, go for the Sonos 5. They throw out very, very wide. But if you don't have much space and you need something smaller, something that will sit on a shelf maybe, then the Sonos 1 or the bookshelves or even the older Sonos Play 3s will actually work in a pinch. And if you absolutely have no more floor space or no more wall space, consider a Sonos M, route the speakers to the ceiling, and you can have them act as surround speakers as well. In terms of sound feel, it does feel a little bit strange, but it really fills up the whole room very, very nicely when you are running ceiling speakers as your surround sound channel. And when you place ceiling speakers, just make sure that you don't have a ceiling fan that is oscillating under the speakers, which will be blocking and dispersing the sound in some weird way, and you will in fact hear wobbling sounds actually because of the sound waves that is being dispersed by the fan blades as they are moving. And even if they're not moving, they're going to be there and they're going to be blocking the way. So take note of that. So for the purpose of today's video, I'm just going to run through some of these options that you have. We want to talk about the height, okay, the height of placement. Ideally, when you're seated in your main listening position, you want these speakers, especially the tweeter, if you can find out where it is, to be at the ear level. So this guy here should be at about your ear level. If you can position this at about this height, then that is ideal, right? So as spoken, to the side and a little bit to the rear, 20 degrees backwards. And a common question is whether the speakers should be firing forward or should be firing towards you in your main listening position. So the answer to that is it should be firing towards you. Now a little bit off axis, actually it is fine. If you refer to the diagram that we have up here, you'll see that it is clearly showing that the speakers are pointing towards the main listening position, not to the front of the screen, towards the listener. Another common question is whether the speaker should be vertical or horizontal. In the case of the IKEA Symphonics bookshelf, you can actually place them vertically or horizontally, and it really doesn't matter. It's one tweeter and one woofer, so as long as the sound is pulsing towards your ears, I think either orientation is fine. Now, what I realized to have made a difference is actually for the Sonos Play 3s as well as the Sonos Play 5s and the Sonos 5s. Now, the tweeters are actually placed to the sides, okay? So if you put it in a vertical position, this is actually firing upwards and downwards. The dispersion, the feel is not that wide when it's in a vertical position. When you place these Play 3s and the Sonos 5s in the horizontal position, the sound dispersion is actually wider, and it actually helps when you have a wider dispersion for your surround speakers. So personally, if I had the space, I would want to place my Sonos Play 3s or the Sonos 5s in a horizontal position if I were to use them in my surround setup. The next thing I'm going to touch about is the distance of placement. Now you're going to be sitting at a single position here. Let's say this is your sitting position. Now, do you want to place this as close to you as possible or as far away from you as possible to get a better sound stage? From my experience, as a rule of thumb, I would advise this. You measure the distance from where you are to the screen, to the front of your setup, to where your soundbar is. If, say, the distance is 10 feet, what you should be doing is to halve that distance, and the distance to either surround speaker should be about 5 feet. So this distance should be half that of the distance between you and the soundbar. Ideally, it really depends on the room, but I would say that you should settle somewhere between 3.5 to about 6 feet. Inside the Sonos app, they allow you to set the distance below 2 feet, 2 to 10 feet, and more than 10 feet. Experience tells me below 2 feet, the sound is going to be too in your face. It's going to be very, very distracting, right? Depending on how far you are away from the screen. But these guys are going to be screaming into your ear at about less than 2 feet. This is about 2 feet. And anything more than 10 feet, the sound is going to be so soft. It's going to be very, very dispersed. And the volume is going to be very, how do you call it? It's uneven and unequally distributed. To the point that if you could be walking around your listening space and these are more than 10 feet away from you to either side, I would think that your soundbar is going to be quite far away from you as well. So when you walk around the space in between that 10, 20, that however big a space that you have, you will realize that the sound is going to be coming from that particular point and that particular point and that particular point. It is not immersive. It is not a good enough sound feel. So recommendation, 3.5 to 6 feet to either side, and to your screen, I would hope that is no more than 7 to 12 feet away. So after you're done placing all the speakers, you have settled them on the stands, on the bookshelves, on the cabinet, wherever you want to place them, and you have measured out the distance and you have placed them properly, you still need to go inside the software, right? So the software allows you to do some degree of surround sound setting for the surround speakers. So for the surround sound speakers, you can actually set the volume of the surround when it's playing in either music or TV mode. So for TV mode, when you're accepting a HDMI or an optical input, these will be actually going to be placed in TV mode. And when it is in TV mode / movie mode, actually, you can set it to either plus 15 or minus 15. So if you really want strong surround sound effects, then you can set it to a plus 15. Or if they are too near to you and you find that they are overpowering and distracting you from what's happening on the screen, set them to a minus 15. Now, the other one is for music, right? When you have music, and say, for example, one of the tips that I've been using is for the purpose of the Sonos 5. When you deploy the Sonos 5s as surround speakers, it sounds like a waste, right, to actually use such capable speakers for the surround. But what I do is that I actually set the music levels for surround to plus 15. So when I play back, these guys will overpower the soundbar, which is the arc or the beam, depending on what I'm pairing them with, so that you can hear more of the sounds from the Sonos 5s. Now, you have to couple that setting with the music playback. So music playback, you can set it to either full or ambient. If you set it to ambient, not all the sounds is going to be passed through the surround speakers. So if you want to use that trick, that tip that I'm passing to you, you actually have to set the sound for music playback to full. So all the frequencies, including the voices, the background, everything, instruments, will be passed to your rear surround speakers. And the last setting will of course be the distance setting. But if you do true play properly, that is actually just the starting point. Now, just do a very good gauge, and as recommended, if you are placing the speakers less than 2 feet or more than 10 feet away, it is probably not ideal. You should set the distance for the surround speakers to between 2 and 10 feet. And talk about true play. That's the last thing you do. Set everything, place everything properly. You want to put it vertical, horizontal, whatever you want. Sit in your main listening position, that one position that you're going to be sitting in most of the time, okay, and do your true play. So for true play, what I recommend is, depending on the kind of setup that you have, sit very still for the first part of the true play. When you true play a home theater setup, there are 2 stages to it. The first stage, you are seated, and you want to be able to make sure that you are not moving your phone and not waving it around too much, because it's trying to detect and try to determine the amount of delay for each channel, including the sub, when it reaches your phone. So you want to make sure that all the sounds are reaching you at the same time, regardless of the distance. The second step is where you will start walking around and waving the phone for that part of the TruePlay, it is actually trying to do frequency tuning. So it listens out to your room, whether the boom is excessive, whether the treble is overplayed, whether there's too much reflection. So it will temper the whole frequency band a little bit to make the sound closer to what the Sonos engineer think is supposed to be a good sound for you. So try it around. I've done videos on TruePlay before. If you're interested, please do check them out, because even different phone generations will impact how your TruePlay sounds. Oh, actually, what I'm holding in my hands today, this is a iPhone 12 Pro. New, but if you try to do TruePlay on a new iPhone, Sonos S2 has not caught up to it yet. I still can't do TruePlay on the new iPhone 12. So if you're stuck with that, let me know in the comment section below. I will let you know as soon as Sonos starts to support TruePlay on the new iPhone 12 series. If you want to be notified of that, please subscribe to the video, leave a like, ring the notification bell so that you can be notified when my new video drops. I'll try to do as many videos as I can, but based on my current work schedule, I'm going to be stuck with about one video drop a week. I will try to do it every Saturday, every weekend. And do come up with your comments. I may not be able to respond to them every day, but when I have time during the weekends, I have some time for myself, I'll start doing that. So to end today's video, I would like to clear a point of confusion, and that is the 5.1 versus the 7.1 setup. I'm going to use two diagrams. I'm going to show up here. This is the 5.1 diagram, which I've been showing you earlier. Now, if you look at how it's being set up, the surround speakers are actually slightly behind, slightly to the rear, about 20 degrees back, as I've told you. Now, if you look at the 7.1 setup that is recommended by Dolby, you see that the side surround speakers are actually firing straight 90 degrees to your either side into your ear, and then the surround speakers for the rear, they are actually pushed much more aggressively towards the back, and this is about 45 degrees off angle to the back, up to 60 degrees even, which is like almost directly behind you already. Now, for Sonos, this is not the encoding that they are using. Yes, you can pass in the 7.1, but when it's rendered, the sound is actually rendered in 5.1. Atmos aside, okay? Atmos, yes, there is a top channel mix, which is routed to the top two firing cones in the Sonos Arc, but that's not for discussion today. For floor level, for ear level, it is the 5.1 setup. So for 5.1 setup, remember the setting, the surround speakers actually has to go somewhere towards the rear of your sitting position, pointing towards your ear, ideally about 20 degrees off, height-wise, ear level. Again, you may not ideally be able to put everything at a perfect location, perfect setup, but as best as possible. And just to assure you, I've used the Sonos M driving my ceiling speakers so that my surround sound is actually coming from the ceiling, and I've also used this play tree before when I've placed them on the floor. Yes, on the floor where my feet are, and I still enjoy the sound. And at the top of this cabinet, which you can't see here, this is actually about 9 feet off the ground. I've placed my speakers up there on the top of the shelf as well, and I am still able to enjoy the surround sound that is coming out from the Sonos surround system. So don't get too hung up about placement, don't get too hung up about whether you're doing the right thing or not. Just place them. Sonos is actually pretty forgiving in terms of placement. And one thing I have to tell you, Sonos actually rolls off the high frequencies. I've done frequency sweeps for those before. When you place any of these speakers as a rear surround channel, Sonos actually rolls off the higher frequency pretty, drastically over and above 4 kilohertz or so. So it's okay. It's not going to be that bad. The directionality is not going to be that demanding. Place them anywhere, as long as they're behind you, you're good to go. Enjoy your setup, and I'll see you in my next video.